Okay, and we're live. We're a little late because somebody was screwing around.
Technical difficulties.
Te- technical difficulties. Yes, you're an honorary boomer. So here we are on Masculine Geek number 211, the return of M, and we're going to be talking about submissive women, collars, and all things BDSM and kink tonight. Now it's been a while. It's been a while since we've talked and we had you on the show. I want to say 7-8 months.
Yeah, it has to have been that long.
Yeah, since before the last summer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, welcome back.
Too long.
It has been too long, yes. So welcome back, even with your lateness. Welcome back.
I'm happy to be back.
Cool, very cool. So I think most of our viewers know who you are, but in case there's a handful that don't, can you explain who you are and what you do?
So I'm M, and I am traditional taboo. So basically, my approach is that I coach couples and individuals in relation to the kink community and DS. I went to school for traditional marriage and family therapy, but in my rotations, when I would do my clinical hours, I just discovered I didn't fit in that environment. And so I went off on my own. And I feel like this niche is the right one for me because I live DS dynamic 24/7. I'm a submissive. And so I feel like it's the best dynamic to have long lasting, passionate connection. And I feel like that's what's missing in a lot of relationships. And if people just were a little bit more open to embracing that, I think we would have a lot more success in relationships out there. So that's kind of my angle, and that's who I am.
All right, cool. And correct, we in fact all of us agree with that mindset that you're talking about. And I've said this before many times, men lead and guide and women follow and serve. And that seems to be the glue that holds the universe together, if you will, sort of a law of nature. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I think that what we have right now is a lot of masculine women and women with a lot of masculine energy. And I think that that's making men take a little bit more of a backseat. And whether, I mean, we could, argue the chicken or the egg kind of rationale, but the idea is I really feel like it's women who are causing this kind of shift in masculinity. And I know there's a lot of people out there that think that it's men just being weaker. But I think that that's exactly what happens when you have polarity. If you have one aspect getting too strong, the other will counter it in an equal measure.
Okay. And I agree with that. But I think when the polarity is such that the man is now in a submissive role, either because he's raised that way or he's just kind of like falling into that because he's giving way to, he's lazy and he's giving way. It's sort of the death by 1,000 concessions with a woman who might be testing him for his dominance and he's failing. So she becomes more masculine. He becomes more submissive. And I think at its heart, she comes to resent him.
Yes.
Yeah.
For that.
That's what I see most often. And some of my most feminist friends, I still see that dynamic happening where even though these women are women that want to take more of a backseat, they don't trust their partner to really, follow through with the things that they either say they're going to do or that she believes is the best thing for them to do in the relationship. And it really comes down to a trust issue.
Yes.
And they just do this sort of back and forth dance of resentment until they get, divorced or they split up.
Yep. Yeah. That seems to be a common scenario, almost like you can predict it.
Yeah, absolutely. You can actually see it happening. If you go to dinner with your friends or you have them over, you can see where she may be dominating the conversation and he's kind of sitting there or she checks what he says.
Yep.
Little signs like that. And you can see he's just kind of broken, sitting there and not stepping up to it. but I would imagine that would get exhausting after a while if you were dealing with that quite a bit.
I can actually speak to that. Here's my story when I was married, because when I said lazy, my ex-wife was fairly dominant, if you will. Okay. And so she kind of wore the pants in a lot of cases. And I remember on many occasions dealing with my family that my mother at the time, when she was still alive, or my father would ask me a question and she would pipe up.
Yeah.
Okay. And, I would just kind of let her answer the fucking question on my behalf, because I wanted to go along to get along until I had finally had enough. And this was, I don't know, maybe about a month or so before I told her I wanted a divorce. But I remember one of the last times sitting in the living room with my parents and with her, my dad asked me some question. And of course, she starts talking. And I turned and looked at her and I said her name, which I'm not going to say it here, but I said her name. We'll call her Amy, just for fun. Not her name, but
I think we should call her Karen.
Oh, well, okay, that works.
Okay, Karen.
Well, I looked at her and I said, Karen, shut the fuck up.
Oh,
I'm talking to my dad.
Good.
And then I turned around and I watched my mom get up off the couch and go into the kitchen. And I'm like, oh boy.
To laugh?
Yeah. Well, at the time I didn't know. I'm thinking
I'm thinking like she's laughing her ass off at that point.
Well, but, I'm thinking, all right, whatever, I'll go deal with her in a while. So, but Karen, just kind of sat back and looked at me shocked, because I just said, shut the fuck up. He's asking me. And so then I turned around and dismissed her and answered my dad's question. I don't even remember what he'd asked me. But then I thought, well, time to go deal with mom, So I get up, Karen and my dad are talking now. And I go into the kitchen and my mom's, over by the sink with her back to me, furiously scrubbing away on some dishes or something. And then she turns around and kind of looks at me over her shoulder. And I looked at her and I was like, what? Because I was expecting her to be like, I can't believe you said that. And then she turns around, looks around to make sure.
It's about goddamn time.
That's pretty much about what she said. She goes,
Yeah,
I am so proud of you for finally, she's like,
that's awesome.
You have no idea how much it pisses me and your dad off.
Oh, what a good mom.
He tries to jump in and we don't want to get involved because that's between you and her. But the fact that you finally did. And I was like, oh, because I was expecting her to be all mad and be like, I can't believe you said that,
Yeah.
You didn't talk to your wife that way type of shit. Instead, she was just like, I'm so proud of you. You have no idea how much it pisses us off when she does that to you and you just let it happen. And I realized at the time, and it ties into my current relationship with the belly dancer to a large degree, what Em was talking about not trusting. Okay. So fast forward past that, because, I eventually filed for divorce, got out of that, got into a bunch of different relationships. And for me, it was, I'm done. I'm done fucking around. I'm done taking a back seat in my own life because it was my fault. I don't blame the women. It was a shit test, if you will, and I was being lazy. And so I just thought, well, I may be seen as an arrogant douchebag, but so what? I don't fucking care anymore. And so from that day forward, I just never did that kind of shit. All right. Well, I met the belly dancer here about 1.5 years ago, and she starts off with the whole strong, independent woman thing. And I literally looked at her and said, that's cute. Just like you've heard me say, Em, that I did. I was like, that's cute, and she got a little pissed off about it. It riled her up a little bit. But the funny thing is she let it go. She dropped it and whatnot. But then many, many months later, it kind of came up again. And she remembered because she stopped me because I started smirking. And she's like, I just want to stop you and explain some things. And I was like, go ahead. Do tell. I'm listening. And she goes, I didn't mean it the way you took it per se. And I was like, oh. She goes, yeah, she goes, I've always had to be the one to take the wheel. And I was like, oh, so your prior relationships, the men you dated, the men you married, even both her husbands that she had been with, were pretty passive dudes. And she said, yeah. And if shit was to get done, I had to do it. And I didn't trust them. And I was like, and so what do you think about you and me? And she's like, you're a different breed. She's like, I know when you say you're going to do something, you do it, because she's very feminine around me. She's very girly, for lack of better words. She fawns and coos and drapes herself on me type of shit, even though she's always had to handle shit. Because the guys in her life, oh yeah, I'll handle it, whatever. And then they never did. And so she had to take the reins, and she, to a degree, ended up resenting them, where I'm just like, just sit back, just relax. Or it's, I got this, shit like that. Or she'll start, clucking about being strong, independent woman. And that's when I just look at her and smirk, and she's like, don't even say it.
Oh, it's adorable.
Yeah, pretty
much.
much.
I feel like a lot of it is these kind of conditional responses that men learn. And, of course, everybody has their theories, but I feel like in my experience, a lot of the times it's however the experience was with their mother. It always kind of comes back to the mom. And if the mother was very domineering and the mother did not allow the boy to
be a man,
experience his life, if she was interjecting into his dating when he started dating, she, was doing things like that, then it tends to prepare that man for a relationship with a woman just like that.
Yep.
And that's where I'm saying the chicken and the egg argument, because are these women coming into these relationships with that energy already? And that's recognized by these men that otherwise would be strong, capable leaders, but they don't rise to the occasion because these women are coming in like mom.
Could be.
Yeah.
Can I throw out a possibility or addition is, it could also be that the men, just to start with, in some cases, not all cases, but in some cases, they're just weak-willed to begin with. Because, I read about, of course, the train has to come by when I'm talking. If you're dealing with, it's the same thing with an over domineering dad. Like Davy Crockett was a very strong-willed man, even as a young man. So when his dad was trying to domineer him, he left and was gone for 2 years and then came back home. So I'm wondering if, in that case, it's yes, but at the same time, it's also a case of just the man was naturally not. I'm not saying in all cases. I'm saying,
oh sure, you can't ever say all.
Right,
and I totally agree.
Yeah, I think that in some cases it's where they're dealing with domineering parents or mother or whatever. If they're weak-willed to begin with, it doesn't take. I mean, I've seen a lot of guys who are weak-willed where their mother just disagrees with them, and that's just they're overwhelmed by it. And then there's guys where they have to basically go to the other side of the country to get away from their family.
Yeah.
On that
hard rebellion. Yeah.
Yeah. They just get up in the middle of the night and just leave and don't say anything. So I think that's where it's difficult, because we don't know. We don't know what that man would have been like if his parents would have been different. And that's where the hypothetical situations, you can't compare unless you were able to go into some alternative universe.
Well, and that's kind of what, and I know Rob and I have talked about this before, because I had mentioned before the whole topping from the bottom argument, and that sometimes it's okay. So this is where I think that topping from the bottom, and so to speak, is and can be useful in situations where you're dealing with a man that came from an environment with a really domineering mother, but or I mean, it's not just the mom, obviously it's caretaker in general, or just maybe they grew up with a single mother and a lot of women in the household, or sisters, a bunch of sisters, and they're the only guy. any dynamic like that where they're around a lot of feminine energy, they tend to take on feminine communication tactics. When they communicate in stressful or hostile situations during conflict, they respond like a woman would.
Yeah.
So these sorts of things are learned in those environments. And I think that sometimes they come into relationships with these strong-willed women, and those women want a man that can lead, but maybe that's in him, but he just needs a little invitation.
Yeah.
And I don't want to rule out, like I see it all the time on Twitter where it's like, well, you either got it or you don't, and this is the way it is. And I don't know if I agree with that, because I think a lot of it, you can come into it and the whole point is to grow in it. And I think that's why I kind of embrace it as a therapeutic, approach, because I think it can help men center themselves in their masculinity and like grow within it. And the same for women, just the converse.
Yeah.
So
I've talked with a friend of mine at work about a little bit of what I do, and he's the quintessential nice guy.
Mm.
And I see everything happening in slow motion, and I see where it's at, but he's love him like a brother, but I still stay out of it. But at the same time, it's difficult to watch. So I try to mentor him with my own behavior and the stories that I tell about my women. He's like, he's like, dude, that sounds like that's so awesome. He's like, I want to be seen as the nice guy. I've always lived that way. And therein, I think, lies one of the problems. These guys, these men are not giving themselves permission to act according to their nature.
I was just thinking that's kind of sad, because you can be the nice guy and leverage that kind of angle.
Absolutely.
And still, be a lead, still be dominant. Like
No, it's true. I think Raul has been mentioned in the chat, and I think it was Raul that said you're an alpha with a side of beta, to use that kind of parlance.
Well, you kind of always have to have that blend. That's what makes you good at what you do.
Exactly. Yes.
I was watching a film recently where it was an older film with this guy he's very friendly, he's very amiable, but it's clear he's giving off a masculine energy. And there's scenes in the movie where he gets firm and he says, I'm done talking about this. We're done arguing. You need to do what I say. And he's not talking to a woman in that situation, but people would describe him as nice until he starts to push to like set boundaries. And that's the issue when people say nice guys don't set boundaries with people. They just get walked all over.
Right.
And I don't necessarily like to use the word nice anymore. When people say, I want to be the nice guy, you want to be the guy who is just he's
well-mannered.
He wants everyone to get along. He wants everyone to like him. He wants his good nature and his helpfulness to be seen, especially by women, as something sexual. And it's not the case. That's not how that works.
I think that there's a couple. This is just my observations from life. I think that's probably the result of him not having any healthy platonic relationships with females in his own family life. So he didn't have good relationship with his sister, good relationship with his mother, good relationship with his aunt. Because the reality is that there's situations where you have relationships, like, for example, with a female cousin or with your sister or your mother, where you can be masculine, but it's a different dynamic than when you're dating. Like, you're not behaving that you can be appreciated within the family for being that way, and you're not expected to it's just a different dynamic. I don't have a sister, so I don't fully know. I just have seen guys who have sisters, and so that I guess that need, if there's an emotional desire there to have a platonic relationship with a female, it's fulfilled with them. Whereas other guys who don't have sisters or don't have any female relatives, they try to express that with their dating relationships.
Okay, so are you saying that you believe that they're exercising this sort of like practice in their relationships of being that nice guy that
they're
they're
trying
their relationship.
I think they're trying to fulfill two objectives at the same time. It's kind of like having the woman you're dating also be your buddy, your best friend, like your guy friend or something like that.
Yeah,
Right. Right. That's the point. But that's the result of a guy not having any male friends. So he's trying to do kind of like I was talking about with the smartphone, where you're trying to make it your one and all. It fulfills all your objectives or needs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for men who don't have that, or they didn't have healthy relationships with their female relatives, and so they're the good parts of them that works well in a platonic female relationship never got appreciated. So they're trying to get that appreciated with women that they're dating.
I think that's interesting. I've never heard it put that way before. I like that. I mean, it's
Yeah,
an interesting theory.
I'm because I'm just thinking about this idea that because I know some guys who they either never had sisters or they never had, especially with men who never had a daughter. And that creates problems, or not problems, but where they're trying to have one female fulfill a bunch of different roles. And that creates a lot of confusion for them because they're both expecting and they're also behaving differently. Kind of like the guy that you were just mentioned. I think Vince was just mentioning, where you want your mother to appreciate you for being affectionate towards her and all that kind of stuff. And you're going to behave differently with your mother than you are going to be with someone with a girl you're dating, because she's not your mother. And you do set boundaries with your mother, but it's just not. It's not the same. You go buy flowers to your mother, or whatever. You be affectionate towards her and that kind of thing. So, but it's not the same with a relationship where it's, I guess, not platonic. I think that the problem is we really don't have a lot of that stuff anymore in our society. And so that, I mean, again, it's just some observations or thoughts, but if it's totally wrong, it's just I'm just trying to
find it interesting because I have never heard that before. That angle. I've never heard that before. And I think I can see what you're saying. I definitely can. And I can see, I'm kind of going through a sort of mental Rolodex of people in my head where I could kind of apply that to, and clients that I know and stuff. My only issue with that is there's a part of me that does believe that you can you have it all fully and completely? No. Perhaps not, but I do believe you can have it all in a person, because I feel like the converse of that, or would you say that women are allowed to have it all then and men aren't? Because I feel like plenty of women are looking for their husbands to fulfill the role of both husband, friend, dad,
Yeah.
So if women are, and we say that that's okay. I mean, it's totally natural for a woman to want a caretaker. It's totally natural for her to want to feel taken care of by her husband and provided for and whatever. This is all just natural. But then why would that not mirror in the masculine?
I think I'll give another analogy. Imagine this is all just, I think it just depends on the man, what is his unexpressed desire. Some guys always, just have this natural desire to have a baby sister, younger sister. Some wanted a big older sister, or maybe it's a girl who never had a brother. And so, but they always wanted one. And so they're trying to get that same dynamic from someone that they're dating, because it's the same thing with guys who I've seen a lot is guys who are expecting their girl to basically be a man in a woman's body, where they want a male friend in the same package as their girlfriend. So they want
my husband's very much like that. Very much like that.
Yeah. And I there's various, there's nuance to it where there's couples that have a lot of the same interests, but guys, I remember one guy who he broke up with his girlfriend and I asked him why, and he goes, because she doesn't want to do all, and he listed all these very extremely physically intense sports, and she was kind of a homebody. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, she's not your.
Hey, you're a
She's not,
dumbass.
Yeah.
she's
Yeah.
You're a
not your like
dumbass.
extreme sports buddy. You know, she likes to stay home and cook or like maintain. It's just, but
What did he want her to do? Go play tackle football or something? Like, what are you looking for?
Shoot guns and fish and all
well,
kinds of
okay,
shit.
so that's huge. Is a lot of guys who, especially my age, who I get like, that's a selling point. Is, oh, she loves to shoot guns. It's like, I couldn't care. I don't care. But what these guys are saying is, I'm looking for a girlfriend and a guy to go shooting with. And so I'm looking for that. I guess that's another version of that dynamic where they're trying to get 2 for 1. They're trying to get 2 birds with 1 stone.
But our
Sounds like a lot of
society
overt
perpetuates
contracts to me.
Right.
Our society says, marry your best friend.
Yeah, I'm glad we talked about it because I have a huge issue with that. Something I always say is your significant other, your lover, is not your friend. You're friendly with them, but fundamentally they cannot fulfill the role of a male friendship. Stop doing that.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Stop trying to. You guys keep stepping on your dick, shooting yourself in the foot, trying to make your girl your everything, and then what happens is she physically, mentally, emotionally, all of it, the whole gestalt cannot happen. So it fucking falls apart, and you go on and then you go to the next one and try to do it again. Yeah. But not only that, because you've tried to make the girl your everything, you fucked over all your friends. You stopped doing the things that you liked. So now when everything goes to shit and it falls apart, you're left with your dick in your hand and you have no support system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, nothing. But what do? It's palliative for a while. Oh, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to do self-improvement. I'm going to get some friends again. And you do the whole fucking cycle back over again.
Yeah. So what they end up doing is that they end up trying to seek approval from their woman that they should be seeking from their male friends.
They shouldn't be seeking, period.
Over
contract.
I'm saying approval. I'm saying approval in the terms of like, yeah, you are a man, you're one of
community.
us.
And well, I don't know. I'm gonna have to agree to disagree on that one because seeking approval.
I'm not talking about like seeking approval from like, hey, mommy, may I? I mean like where your
acceptance.
They're trying, yeah. It's like, yeah, you're one of the guys. Like, you know, like with Masculine and Geek, you know, you got to live up to some standards.
There's got to be, there is a standard and level of
he's proven himself to meet a certain standard, but he's trying to seek that from someone who doesn't understand or those aren't her standards. I guess I get
what Rob is saying. I get what you're saying.
I think it's syntax. It's syntax.
Yeah, it's also contextual.
Yeah, like I don't want to seek approval from like other men on certain things in my life, but what I do, if there's a guy I respect and he says, "Hey, like I'm seeing this in your life," or you know, I can't hang out with you anymore because of this behavior. That's where there's an issue going on. But if they're like, you know, I don't like you going to the weight room every day. It's like, that's nice. Dumbbells are part of my religion. I'm going anyways.
TJ, we don't like you talking about the Pacific Northwest.
But I do think that's where we run into these like major issues when it comes to relationships, because this sort of idea is perpetuated through our whole society that you marry your best friend and you should be best friends first before you become lovers and all this crazy shit. And
it's ridiculous.
What happens is then they get into the relationship and that friendly energy totally tanks the sexual chemistry. And then once that goes, you don't have anything but a live-in roommate that you share chore lists with and you raise kids with. And so
it's crazy you say that because I talked to somebody I knew years ago, ran into him, just got divorced. They said that's exactly what the relationship turned into, was them being roommates
that raise kids together.
So this is a great segue into the BDSM aspect of it and women being submissive. So you're counseling couples that are struggling with their marriage or relationship, whatever. And how do you go about? They've read your profile. They're coming to because they have an interest in this. Mm-hmm. Have they ever delved into it at all? Are they fresh off the boat, so to speak, when they come to you?
Yeah.
Do they have an idea about it? And how do you go about introducing that to them? Because essentially the man has to guide and lead. He's got to take over his natural inclination and get in touch with that.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman has to realize, all right, well, my role, my submissive role, because right now it's not coming out of me naturally when I'm with this man. So how do I do that? So how do you get the couples together and, for lack of a better word, teach them? How
Like
does that
start
actually
the process. Yeah.
Yeah, how's that actually? How do you jumpstart that? How's that happen?
So I get a mix of people, and I actually have a lot of individuals too,
Okay.
that want, and they're in a really good spot because they're going to go into a relationship with kind of a framework to start, which is good. The couples typically are already at that kind of really bad crossroads, and they're kind of grasping for straws, and they're like, we're having all of these issues, all of these communication problems, all of this, all of that. And so they're kind of at a desperate point because sometimes he's looking at certain porn on the internet that makes her then question why. And it's usually, DS themed or like a dominant man.
So the kind of stuff that makes your camera turn off and you can't get it started again.
There's a myriad of reasons, but usually they're already kind of broken. They're already there. So that's good and it's bad because, again, as you guys all know too, the foundation of DS is trust. And when you're already broken in that area, it's like you're building two things up at once. And without a solid foundation, that's kind of where I come in because I can help the process along the way. Introducing it can be tough because it requires a big leap of faith on usually the submissive's part, because you're getting a lot of, and what I see, masculine women. So what they then have to do is surrender kind of upfront. They have to take a leap of faith and allow him to step into the role a little bit. And even at its most gradual, you have a woman that's so used to control at this point that it's almost like you're taking her life force away. She doesn't know what to do. It induces anxiety in her. And that kind of dynamic, as soon as they get back into life, she will then kind of manifest that energy at him, and then he takes that backseat role again. So it's little baby steps, and you just do it through various practices. And it depends on where the couple's at and how comfortable they are in their sexuality together. How long has it been since they were like intimate together? How adverse is she to housework and stuff like this? So you have to collect all of this information so that you can kind of look at it and say, where would I start with a practice? And it's almost, as I'm thinking about it right now, it's almost dominance, because I literally take a couple and then give them a plan of how to create that dynamic in themselves. And then usually it's a lot of unpacking, a lot of like family trauma history stuff that actually is weighing down the couple. That's usually what I see the most.
Okay. Now there's in our corner of the male, I'll say male spaces, where there's the idea, we know this, that women want men to just get it.
Yeah,
they do. So how does that play in when they're both? She's obviously with a man that doesn't get it, and they're coming to you for you to teach him how to get it. That seems to me like,
I actually see that he gets it. That's the thing. I see that he gets it, but he's not allowed to exercise.
He's not giving himself permission to go ahead.
Well, and then he's allowing her to, and her anxiety and her getting worked up, and her, again, where it's like TJ was saying, approval in that case is definitely approval, where he's like seeking that it's okay, and he's not getting it from her because she's scared. So then he gets anxiety, which in these women that are losing control looks like a crazy bitch most of the time, but she's just scared.
I feel like men instinctively get it on.
I think so too.
What happens is it contradicts or goes against. They got two contradictory desires. They get it, but at the same time they see this behavior and they're thinking like a guy. Where if a guy's acting like that, I mean, because I think about men, like if men acted as upset, if a man acted as upset with me as I've seen with women, somebody's going to get killed. Somebody's going to go fight. There's going to be a fight. Whereas with females I've seen who get hysterical, you kind of like what Rob said, you tell them to shut up and it's over. Like there's no deeper emotion on that kind of stuff. Whereas with a guy, it's depending. Now, if they're kind of not a feminine guy, but if they're more of a female minded, they may think the same way. But like with a lot of with traditionally masculine guys, you tell them to shut up while they're worked up. You better be either have an exit door behind you or be prepared.
There's going to be a fight. Yeah.
And they guys think that like, oh, I have to calm this person down or there's going to be violence. And I think that's what they instinctively feel. That's because that's just the male instinct is, oh, we need to de-escalate before there's violence.
I think I really like your perspectives because again, that's like kind of the opposite of what I typically kind of where my head goes, because what I think a lot of these men are dealing with is that's when they didn't pick up their room and their mom's upset. Yeah. And now their mom's screaming at them for not picking up their room and not doing their chores and not doing what they were supposed to do. And now she's yelling at them. And so as a little boy or child, they would sink into themselves and kind of become small. And then they would have to suck up to mom to get approval from her again, to where now she's going to acknowledge his presence. She's going to tell him he's a good boy. She's going to tell him that she loves him again. And now he's back in her good graces. I think he just repeats that cycle with the woman in his life because it's ingrained in his,
that's very likely, especially for guys who grew up in a either female dominated environment or with the single mother where but I think that part of that is also their,
or a beat down father.
Or beat down father. Yeah. Or they saw their father freak out whenever the mom got, freaking out, where he's scared. And it's like he just associates with the dad, and it's like, oh, if dad's scared when mom's upset, then I'm kind of like, if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy.
Exactly.
You sponge up that relationship dynamic as a kid.
Whereas if the kid had ever seen the dad say, you know what, knock it off, and then immediately it's over. Because I've seen families like that, and the kids unfortunately, that can cause problems where the kids are like telling the mom to shut up and all that kind of stuff, which that's a different problem. But I think that's one of the difficulties with some men where they need permission to be more assertive is they're instinctively deep down in like their primitive hindbrain, they're worried about violence. Like
I think that's really interesting. I've never thought of it like that. These are two things now I've never considered that you've brought up.
It's just a theory of like how a lot of guys see that, and they're treating their woman like a man. I think that's the part of the problem is like where when their woman's getting upset, they're like, oh, I'm thinking like a man. When I get upset, I'm ready to go hit somebody, or I'm getting really worked up. And when men go into fight or flight mode, they either leave the room or they're going to start to fight. Whereas that's not, I'm not a woman, so I obviously don't know what it's like, but I'm assuming that because they don't have as much testosterone, when they get worked up, it's not like I'm ready to inflict violence and it's beyond my control type thing. If any of that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, no, it makes total sense. I'm just thinking that usually women do resort to violence. So that's the strange part. And that's where it kind of.
That could bring up
because they have no fear of consequences.
Yeah.
Well, and that leads to another problem with the men is that they try to assert themselves, it leads to escalation, and then they go into fight or flight mode. And this is all
most men are afraid. They are afraid of women's emotions.
Yes.
Your common average of run of the mill American male 99% of the population, male population, is afraid of women's emotions. That's what it comes down to. It's not violence.
I think you're so right with that, and that's what I see. And it's kind of to link it back to DS, because with that, you absolutely cannot go into that dynamic fearing her emotions, because the dynamic itself brings out her emotions. So you have to know how to navigate that. And when you take a couple that is totally new to that world altogether, and you're having him step up into his role, into his masculine, you're having her surrender a little bit, you're dealing with the trust issues there, you're trying to kind of get them to disassociate a little bit. I guess that would be the wrong word, because disassociation can be bad, but kind of correct or right those patterns in their minds, and then build that whole thing up into a better relationship. And it's hard to do that if he is very intimidated by her emotions. And that's what I usually see. And it's because men seem to think, from my experience, that however she is in this moment is a reflection of who he is as a person and as a man, rather than her mood. And those are two very different things.
I think that's actually, to go back, I think that's actually more true than anything I just said, is that they think that the female's emotions is a reflection of who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And so
it speaks to them on a character level, like it's character assassination. If she thinks he's, let's say he does react with that kind of like fight mode, and he punches the wall, right? And now he's violent. And she says, "You're violent," right? And she's, now I'm afraid of you. So now, even if she's really not, and she utilizes that incident to leverage power over him, he's going to be like, oh, fuck, because now his feeling is, what if I am a violent person? Am I an abuser? What do I do? And so now he's like, it's that good guy in him, right? That's like trying to process through all of that. When the bottom line is, it's the moment for her. And that moment and that mood is, that energy for her is, she wants to either regain the control in that, situation, or she literally is looking for him to respond to her feelings.
Senseless.
And exactly. I did a tweet about that the other day.
There's a scene in with he played Aragorn. TJ, help me out here. In Lord of the Rings, Aragorn. Viggo Mortensen. So it's
I like him.
Yeah, he there's a movie called History of Violence. And I'm not gonna give anything away. It's really good. Go watch it. It's not what you think. The character is playing another person. Viggo's playing has a double life. Anyway, what happens is he and his wife get into a fucking argument on the stairs, and as they're walking up the stairs, and he's like, "Fuck this." He manhandles her, pushes her down, practically chokes her, and fucks the shit out of her. And she's just responding. And they're both fucking animals, and it's fucking great. Mm-hmm. I bring that up because Mictobus just made a comment, which I popped up on the thing here. It's very true. There's too much thinking going on both sides.
Yeah.
You have to. I always say you have to care and not care at the same time.
Yeah, and I feel so bad because I really do. I agree with what you're saying, but I also worked in law enforcement for 7 years, and like I saw where that goes to,
I'm sure it can go to a dark. Absolutely, I'm sure it can go to a dark place. But without the legality and the extra stuff that goes along with it. I mean, that is men and women at their rawest and primal.
No, what I mean is not that, because honestly, that was very actual cases of, forced sexual assault and stuff was incredibly rare. It was usually false allegations.
Oh, false allegations. Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's a whole nother can of worms. But
you mean women aren't always honest?
No, say it ain't so.
God, no. And that I'm just thinking of random stories in my head right now. But Yeah, what I feel is they're intaking the information about in like in the media and the Me Too movement and all that kind of thing. And so they're afraid in that regard because what they're getting is that side of it, the side that's like, well, if you if you come on too strong or you physically put your hands on her and then if she's mad and I do that, then is she going to call the cops? Like even if in the end they're afraid to initiate that beginning because they don't see the end going well.
Well, they never did it to begin with.
Right.
It's
and it's tough, right? Because then if you give people that, and that's where I struggle too, because as a woman, I know that that's what you really do want, that like deep down you want that energy. And sometimes, like I tweeted about, that bratty energy is just that wanting to be fucked. But I can see where if you don't have that kind of trust established, or maybe you're just in the dating world or whatever, how in the world do you feel? I feel for men, because how do you do that without fear that you're gonna, you're gonna have your job taken from you and your ability to support yourself? And then now there's, a police report out there that you.
Well, I think that this is just me. This goes to where men, at least for me, the ability to read a woman is everything now. If I can't read a woman, like I can't read like who she is or what she's about or anything like that, it's just a no-go. It doesn't matter whether she's everything I ever want on the surface. You can't read them. It's this is where the permanent resting bitch face thing is so bad, where you just can't read them. And that becomes more important now than it was maybe years ago, when there was some leeway for stuff. And I'm sure somebody's going to say, well, who cares or whatever. Well, I don't know what to say to that, if people were going to like argue about it, but it's really a question of, how much is a guy wanting to risk and what's the reward for it. But yeah, that's the problem, is that and the other problem is a lot of guys take to heart the stuff that they hear in the media, which they shouldn't, but they do, because it just never occurs to them that anybody would just say stuff that they don't mean. They take that stuff literally, when it's just, I read stuff now, I'm like, yeah, this is all bullshit. This is all projecting. This is all like just not serious stuff.
Yeah.
But you also just don't know about, kind of like you were saying with the police stuff, where people just they're so confused, and that's where like the mental health problems that go on. I mean, yeah. I covered police crime stuff for years, and the amount of domestic violence cases I looked at where it was like the same pattern of behavior was pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I learned more working in that environment and in that than I ever learned through all of my years of school. I mean, that was like where you saw all the patterns, because you see people at their worst all the time. So yeah. I mean,
and also what was amazing is the amount of, I guess, where they just, where it was like a script. The exact same thing was happening again and again and again. Didn't matter who it was. It was the same thing where there was an incident, domestic violence case. Then the girl would reach out to the guy with who has a no contact order against him, convince him to meet up at some place. They have a fight. Then he's arrested, and then it just continues on and on and on.
Yeah, and you actually bring up a good point here, because this actually ties into DS, and if it helps men, because I think it should. In actual domestic violence cases, most of the time, it was very rare that the men actually, and I know people don't want to believe this, I know people are really uncomfortable with hearing this, but most of the time, she provoked him by either getting in his face, cornering him in a room, like getting in his way, trying to grab onto him, scratching him, doing a number of things to him before he ever reacted at all to it. Most of the time, the men were trying to escape. They were trying to literally leave the house so that nothing happened.
I used to work for Drink Mental Health, a crisis house, and some of the patients that would be residents there for 2 weeks would be abused women, kind of transitioning back into society, as it were.
Mhm.
And not for anything, like I know why you got your ass beat.
And I know that's like, that makes people's skin go like, ugh.
Yeah, no, you are a willing participant in your ass beating.
In a lot of
you
ways.
you can see this of like, you are a pain in the ass. You're a complete pain in the ass. I understand why provoking people, just I would say evil, just
Mhm.
miserable, malicious
Mhm.
females.
Yeah. But the reason why I bring this up is because I think if you understand the pattern of that, you would understand that really it's not the physical aspect that made that become an issue, right? It was that she kind of needed to be reined in
Yeah.
and it didn't happen. So she escalated. And then he blows up
Exploded,
because
yeah.
he's withholding that energy the whole time.
Yeah.
So it's natural for couples, especially passionate couples, to have this kind of, a little bit of heated exchange sometimes. But this is where I think men need to not be so afraid to, to get control of the situation.
Absolutely.
Because if you allow her to escalate too much and you keep so much of that energy
It's going
back,
to blow up anyway.
it will blow up anyway.
It's
And
going to
it'll
blow
be
up either
worse.
way, and the man might as well be fucking in charge.
Yeah, and it would be way worse if it were to blow up in that situation. It's going to be 10 times worse because he's holding in that the whole time.
Yeah.
So I feel like DS is so good for all of this. This is just another way, and I've actually never thought of it this way. But this is another way in which I think it takes that natural fire that a passionate couple has, and it gets a little bit of temperance, a little bit, like where he kind of keeps the control of that fire. And in that, it gets kind of, I don't know, to me, it keeps it burning for years.
I want to discuss boundaries, but even before that, I want to get to some meat of this, the interesting stuff, because Rob's going to fall asleep in a moment. So, I want to.
Cardboard Rob.
Rob's a cardboard cutout Rob tonight. So I want to discuss and get your take on it. I think we talked about it briefly last time, but I want to go over it again. Submissive women. So you are a submissive woman in your dynamic with your husband.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like?
And it's going to look different for everybody. So,
mm-hmm. There's a general flow to this. Obviously, mm-hmm. the nuance is everyone has their nuance and their gestalt, as it were.
Yeah.
But there are categories that we can sort of like compartmentalize and put things mm-hmm. into, just for the sake of the conversation.
Yeah. So he's in charge of quite literally everything, including me. I kind of take care of a lot. I take care of all of the domestic stuff. So I fold all of his clothes. I'll do all the laundry. I do all the cooking, shopping, meal prep, all of that kind of thing. I also do all of his personal grooming. And then I take care of, just everything having to do with him that is not, his, I guess, agency is the best word. Because if it's his like goals, mm-hmm. his profession, his, whatever motivates him or whatever, that's all his. And I just support that. So I perform the supporting role of wherever the direction he decides to take us is. And because I trust him, I always know it's in the direction of a better us. So I literally do everything outside of whatever his goal is.
Okay. American Geisha. So would you say that's happiness and fulfillment for you?
For me, it is. Yeah. I know that for some people it wouldn't be. I do have a natural caretaker, nurturing energy. and I do show love through acts of service. So for me,
that was my next
and I
question,
tell
yeah.
people when they're like, "Oh, how do I find a submissive woman?" It's like, oh my God. So I tell them first, the more important thing to look for, one, is everything that, like, the regular things you would want in a person before you just look for submissiveness, regular qualities and principles and morals and whatever it is that you want. But if you want somebody who's kind of naturally submissive or naturally lean submissive, I always tell them, look for the woman that wants to bake you cookies or wants to, like, when she suggests doing something together, it's usually something where she can, like, show you how she can take care of you. Mm-hmm. So acts of service for a submissive is a big deal. It's like
there's
the way we
show impressing her man. Yeah.
Yep. So it's, oh, if you're dating a girl and she's like, oh, I just wanted to make you these cookies, or you come over to her house and she's like, can I get you a drink of water? Or like, can I get you anything to drink? And those kinds of signs are like, she's looking to please. She wants to show you that you're appreciated and valued. She's happy you're there. Those are I think, a telltale sign that, like, you're going to be on a good road to developing that submissive side in her, because you're not just going to find her, for God's sake. Like,
no, I know it's and to a large degree in some aspects, it's submissive woman is built and trained.
Yeah, I mean, I was.
Yeah, as you well know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and my expression is the way it is because I feel for my husband, because he definitely went through the ringer trying to do that. So whenever I hear people like, oh, you find them. And the thing is what good is that anyways? Like, the fun is in developing it.
Exactly. It's not the destination, it's the journey with that kind of stuff. It's so many things. Yeah. And that sounds cliched, but it's true.
Yeah. In this dynamic, it definitely is true. Like,
oh yeah. And
boring, like the whole boring trad thing where it's like, I just want to wear my apron and churn butter and then put a meal on the table for my man and our 17 children. And it's like, okay, because in reality, that would be a miserable existence.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many people are LARPing online about that kind of stuff.
Well, everyone's LARPing online about that shit. Everybody.
Well, that's what I think is funny. Is like these people are all LARPing about this stuff because the people who are actually doing this stuff aren't really. Well,
they're not on their social media. Yeah.
They're too busy churning that butter.
Yeah, exactly. Or they're too busy miserable, because when you have 17 kids, I'm sorry, you're going to be miserable. There's no way around it. Like, stop. Okay.
Yeah. I do have a question for you as far as like getting the man to like be more dominant. Is there any ground rules that you set with the woman saying like, look, if you're going to act out in a way where he needs to like put you in your place, it can't be in front of other women or other men? And the reason why I'm asking that is because if a guy's learning to be dominant, the moment he tries to do that, when people around him are used to him not being that way, it's crabs in a bucket, where they're going to be like, oh, wait a minute, we need to put you back in your place. Where other women get into his face, he can't put them in their place because they're not his women. And if it's other guys suddenly white knighting, that creates a whole.
Well, Rob just gave us anecdotal evidence that that is not true, TJ.
Well, my answer to you from my perspective is I would not tell him to approach it any other way. So if there's other women in the social circle or whatever that comes at him cross, I would say he needs to take the same position with them.
Yep.
Interesting.
Same with the men too, because it builds respect. So since really the primary language between men is a language of respect, right, that, having that sort of, the more confident the man, the more agency that man has in the decisions that he's making, the more he exudes that energy, the more the men around him respect him. So that I would say whatever you're doing, and in reality, whatever you do in your personal life, you tend to manifest in the outside world too. So if you're a pussy in your home life, you're going to be that out in the world, and everybody's energy towards you is going to be that of, well, this guy's weak and I'm going to treat him as a weak guy.
They can read it in your body language.
Yeah. Because you're leaving your miserable ass marriage. You're walking out the door and you're like, oh, I hate my life. And then you get in your car and you go to work and you've got this frown on your face and your energy's low. And now everybody else treats you like you're weak too. Like the only option is to like get up, like do something about it.
I want to throw my 2 cents into this because you've all thrown around a lot of things, a lot of what ifs, a lot of hypotheticals, and yet you all have missed probably the major part, which was what I said at the beginning. My opinion, and this is not a therapeutical diagnosis, if you will. I'm not advocating for it, but I think
therapeutical.
Well, it's not therapeutical. That's right. But the thing where I've heard everybody throwing different things around, and yet I gave my answer that, well, what is it going to take for a man to be dominant? What's it going to take? Well, it depends on if he's with the men. It depends on if he's around women. All this other shit doesn't matter. A guy will become dominant when he has had enough pain.
Okay. Yeah, so I said you gave anecdotal evidence in the beginning.
That's the point, that when I hear, well, this guy came for this and this guy said this and this guy acted this way. And, TJ brought up seeking approval, which, he wanted to try and clarify it. To me, it doesn't matter. The guy, whoever it is, this hypothetical man that we're talking about, has not suffered enough, because when he does, he's going to do one of 2 things. He's either going to say enough and he's going to burn it all down, and he's going to rebuild himself. He's going to reforge himself into something better in the definition of he's good with who he is. Okay. Yep. Or he's going to eat a bullet.
I know, but that's where I'm like bothered with it.
I understand. Hey, let me finish just for a minute, just for a sec. Please. Most men aren't going to eat a bullet, because I think suicide would even be higher than it already is. And trust me, I've looked down the barrel of a gun enough times. And part of it was during my marriage. That was an option. And it was a pleasant looking option. Eating a shotgun was actually an option, and a viable one. And I had to kind of literally slap myself and go, whoa, what are you thinking? Granted, I didn't choose that option. And not all guys are going to choose it. Not all guys are going to reforge themselves. Some crack. And I hate to see it when it happens, but I can't save the world. All I can do is save myself. And so when I look at it and I think, how did I make such drastic changes? Because the option was death.
Yeah, you're right.
That was it. That is it. And when I hear all this stuff you guys have been talking about, these are guys, hypothetical guys, that have not hit rock bottom. They're not there yet. So
why should you have to get there?
Because that's the only way you make real change from my experience.
I don't think that's true.
And that's where we're going to have to agree to disagree. And I'm okay.
Yeah, because I really don't think it's a healthy thing to say, you know what? You've got to go through so much pain that you're either going to kill yourself or you're going to rise above. And then that's where you discover that you're dominant. Wow. Like maybe that's because of my background, but there's no, like, with the way the society plays such a huge role, culture plays such a huge role, the number of single mother households playing such a huge role, and how these men are literally being raised from the time that they are babies. It's in their
The thing is,
Programming.
everything you're talking about, Em, I had the single mother, the dominant single mother. I was a pussy. All of those things. You're showing me everything I went through. It's a story I know well and intimately. It ultimately had to come down for me to be willing to kill myself or burn the world to rebuild my world and say, I don't care if she divorce rapes me. I don't care if she calls the cops on me. I don't care if she blows a rape whistle on me. I don't care about any of that stuff.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Rob, because what you're talking about is what men go through by themselves.
Right.
They're not talking about it, and then someone's saying, "Oh, well, you don't have to do that. Let me tell you why." They're not talking to anyone. They're just this is happening behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
They are doing this in silence. They are doing this their own way, and they are doing this.
And they have to suffer for
they
however
have
long
they have to go. Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and it is true.
I think one thing I'm interested in Robert's opinion because he's the one with kids.
I have kids.
But we're talking about men being dominant, and the situation changes. I'm a bachelor, no kids, but I understand and appreciate the difference between where you reach a crisis point, but there's kids involved. Like I don't know what that's like personally.
I don't either.
But that's the thing is like,
yeah,
I think a lot of guys reach that crisis point, but it's no longer about them only. So like, Robert, you have any?
Well,
but isn't that truly masculinity though? When it comes down to it, men usually have a purpose. They find their purpose in things like their family. Like that's the problem, is that that's being taken from so many people. It's not just me and my, like the way society wants to say it, like perpetuate this idea that men are just like, it's just me and my dick and that's all I care about. Like that's just so not accurate to what I see.
I think where we're getting at is, what is it going to cost a man to be truly in control of his life and dominant in his life?
The willingness to burn it all down. That's what it's.
Yeah, but burning it all down means something different for a guy who's.
Make a decision before that. That's what I'm saying.
I'm saying if you're a guy who's got 3 kids. And
I know plenty of guys, whether you want to say they did the right thing, the moral thing, the good thing, they fucking walked away from families in some cases and left it all behind.
Well,
I'm not saying they're right. I'm not saying they're right. This isn't about morality, but that's what it took them to rebuild who they were, is they walked away from everyone, the wife, the kids, and everyone.
So for some men to be dominant in their own life is much, much easier than for others. So one guy being dominant in his life is not the same as a guy being dominant in his own life. It's the same thing. It's the same thing with a guy saying, "Hey, I own a home in Kansas City," and a guy saying, "I own a home in the Seattle area." It's not the same because one is $1.7 million. Another is $150,000. So buying that's the point I'm saying. Is like for some men, they have to give up or sacrifice way more to get to the same place,
but they have to be willing to let it burn.
But other men are not willing. Other men are able to become.
And they continue.
And all this is on a scale too. I mean, Rob is showing the suicide, gun in the mouth, whatever, jumping off the building. That is an
extreme end. I'm not
that's
deny that.
What I say is, hang on. What I want to say is that's an extreme. That's out there, but there are other ways that guys. Because I went through when I was going through a divorce, I was going through an end of my rope. I'm done. How I was dealing with women wasn't working. How I was raised. So I wasn't going to kill myself because I have too much of an ego. How could the world not have me in it? You kidding me? No. Fuck you, world. I'm in this world, and you're going to take it. Exactly. I'm too much of an arrogant dick to not be in this world. I'm going to go out however I'm going to go out, but it's not going to be by my own hand unless I have a terminal illness, and Rob and I have a plan for that.
Right.
Exactly. So, but there are scales of burning yourself down, coming to a rock bottom for you. It doesn't have to be. There was a rock bottom for me that didn't involve a gun or hurting me. But I came to that conclusion myself. No one helped me, and it was the best thing that ever happened in my own life.
Same.
And then I just built up from there. Like we're saying, it wasn't an extreme. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
go talking about it. I wasn't on there was no social media, but I wasn't talking to family and friends about it. I went through it myself, and it was something that I had to do. And when my mindset shifted and I put certain things into effect, which I did wind up writing about it. But for me, that was my own turning point. That was my own my Vince rock bottom.
Right. And that's what I'm kind of trying to say, is that you're right. Like there's a range, and you can make a decision prior to a rock bottom that sounds like burning everything down. Because in my opinion, I think some of these relationships are fixable. I think they are, but it requires the change that you're talking about. And that can be where you don't necessarily have to walk away. Now that depends on everybody's relationship. Everybody's relationship's different. But I also think that in like, when you're talking about, I had to reinvent myself, I was looking down the barrel of a shotgun. Mm-hmm. How you reinvented yourself in your dominance is also on that more extreme end as well. So that's not always, you know what I mean? So and that's fine. Like everybody has their own thing. But my thing is like, I believe it's fully possible to make the decision to transition into a more dominant, more, I guess I would say masculine, more agent.
I'll give an example. So there's two different guys, a tale of two guys. One is surrounded by.
Is this in the Pacific Northwest?
No, it's not. No, I'm just giving an analogy. There's one guy in Yellow Wood.
Two homos.
One's named Aaron Clary, the other is not.
Right.
No, I'm just saying, like, so there's one guy who is surrounded by family, loved ones, what have you. They are all just sitting there waiting for him to just assert himself in his own life. They all want him to. Then you've got the other guy where they will all literally do anything and anything to stop him from asserting himself, even if it requires violence. Like he's got to have to resort to violence to just assert himself in a completely healthy way. One guy it's like, yeah, just the first guy is probably a weak-willed guy. Like I was saying earlier, he was weak-willed to begin with. He didn't know how to assert himself. The other guy is, and if there's kids involved, that involves just a whole different dynamic. And that's kind of the point I was saying is like, when we're talking about all this different stuff, the context is everything. Like, what is this person having to deal with? Some people are born into families or they're born into circumstances or environments where, I mean, the guy who's truly lucky is where he doesn't have a whole lot of ties or anything holding him back. It's just, he just needs to just assert himself. And then there's other people where he's got to completely, and I don't want to say necessarily reinvent himself, but there's so many relationships that are so toxic, there's no salvaging it. That's right. On the extreme too, but it really just depends on who you're dealing with. And so when people, but this is where it gets so mixed up, is because everybody's bringing their own personal experiences of like, what did it take you to be assertive in your own life? For some people, it cost $1 million, like a house. Other people, it cost $150,000. That doesn't make the house any less quality. It's circumstantial.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I have a few comments on this.
It still goes back to then apparently if you haven't figured it out yet, you still haven't suffered enough, is what I'm saying.
So the $1 million house is not a house? Like, to use the analogy, like I'm not sure what...
If you're willing to be in a prison, whether it's $150,000 house or it's $1 million home, a prison is a prison, if we're going to use your analogy. Apparently, your gilded cage hasn't made you suffer enough.
So every dominant has to first be a masochist?
Well, I would say to a degree, it's a certain amount of suffering you got to go through. That it's like, hey, if you're going to be dominant in your own life and write your own path and decide this is how I want to be, there's always going to be, whether you want to call it society, culture, the technology, feminism, all the shit, single moms being raised at the knee of a parent. We all suffer. And this isn't about being a victim. You just suffer. And there comes a point where you have to be willing, again, using metaphor, not real, but you have to be willing to burn it all. You have to hit rock bottom, whatever that rock bottom is. You have to be willing to say, I'm burning $1 million home down. Like I said before, not saying it's good, bad, or otherwise, but if a guy's willing to walk away from a family, if that's what it takes him, then that's what it takes him. If a guy's willing to look down the barrel of a gun, then if that's what it takes him, then that's what it takes him. You could be the guy that's weak-willed and have the family that's just going, come on, step up. And he does, and they applaud him, but then he goes out into the world and somebody goes, no. Does he stand up to that when he had all this encouragement, or does he deflate when he hits reality? These are the things I'm talking about. So, like I said, we're going to probably not see eye to eye on all of this, and that's okay. But to me, when I'm hearing a lot of hypotheticals instead of actualities. And yes, context matters, but everyone only has their own story. That's the thing. I don't know what
some people are never going to be put. Some people are never going to be.
The only thing you can do is hypotheticals.
Yeah,
that's the whole point.
Like some people are never going to be put in a situation where they have to deal with that stuff. I mean,
and some people will never break their chains. And that's okay. That's not my life. Not my
what alternative to the hypotheticals is their own life stories, which is
right.
The majority of us on this panel, maybe all of us on this panel. The one thing I wanted to jump in for was the comment on whether or not this factory reset was healthy. Or sorry, I don't think it was whether hitting rock bottom was healthy or not. And I would say it's not healthy, but it's not healthy for you in the same way that hitting the factory reset button on your computer isn't healthy. It's
you
not
have a
good.
Great
you don't,
voice, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just had to throw that in.
Oh, this is James. James is
I'm James. I don't know if I might have met you on a Fortress meeting.
I think you were on you were on the private Fortress. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right. But I don't think we've been on a show together.
Well, hello. You have a wonderful voice.
I'm going to interject really fast. You're talking about acts of service. My main girl made me chocolate dipped mint biscuit.
Oh,
I thought that was flavor.
Lovely.
Yeah, so she bakes something every time she's over here.
Good girl.
Indeed. It's so good.
So I just wanted to hop in and say that the I know that, yeah. So it's not healthy to hit rock bottom by any stretch of the imagination, and going through that experience in order to actually change yourself it's preferable that you change before that, right? It's preferable that a marriage swings in the correct direction. If you've ever called a married red pill or anything like that, or if you've watched Mid's Watch by Brian Stone, there's a ton of it on there. Of people gradually changing their relationships. Sometimes on the flip side of the aisle, the field report has written about what the wife is doing to make the relationship better. It's preferable that people change before getting to rock bottom, but a lot of times, like that factory reset button, it's not healthy necessarily, but it is often for people necessary to do it. If I have enough viruses on my computer, it's not preferable that I hit the factory reset button, but at some point it becomes my only option because the system is borked. It can't work how it is. And either I let it die, either I let my computer die, or I hit that factory reset button.
Drug and alcohol addiction.
There you go. Plenty of alcoholics found sobriety when they wrapped their car around a tree.
My cousin was the same way.
It's just a difference, and obviously my angle is going to be in counseling, so it's different. I want to see them before they're that.
Well, I think if you've got
absolutely.
If you got both of them in counseling with you, I'm not talking about regular marital counselors. That's just, the next step towards divorce. But if they're actually willing to talk, whereas, in a lot of cases, it's just from what I've seen, it's one person is, this is who I am. And if it destroys me, I will not change. And what their power comes from the other person thinking, like not being able to process that kind of mindset. And thinking, oh, here's all these things, coping strategies. Here's all these things I can do if I just stick it out, whatever. And then they finally kind of like what Rob says is where I will agree is there is a rock bottom where they realize this is never going to change, and they got to burn the relationship. I'm not saying it, you know, like by looking at shotgun, but like there's something that happens. And but the thing is, like going back to what I was saying, the rock bottom for a man is going to be different for every other guy. Doesn't make him better or worse than any other guy. It's just where the rock bottom is. But for some guys, they don't ever reach rock bottom. And Rob may say they don't fully know that. And I would say that there's a lot of guys out there who seem to be assertive and dominant, but that's because they've never been tested.
Correct.
And I guess that's my point, is like there's a lot of guys out there that we would argue is dominant and assertive, but that's because they've never been in an environment where they've actually had to like prove themselves.
Yeah.
Honestly, good for them. If it comes to pass that they never get tested, get yours, man. Congratulations. I wish everybody who lives life on easy mode well.
Well, I mean,
but if it comes to the moment where you find out that's not you anymore, it's gonna be pretty rough finding out.
Well, I mean, there's guys who are frankly, there's gonna be guys who go through life on easy mode in that sense, where they just being dominant for them is easy because everyone around them is submissive. Like there's their family submissive, their girl submissive. Like this is where the whole red pill thing talking about alphas. There's some guys who just they've never. That's how a lot of alphas in their early 20s end up being complete betas in their 30s and 40s, because it was just that's how it always was for them. But when it finally come to shove, they're married to a single mother or divorced in their 50s, and they have no idea what the hell happened, because I've seen that. So that's where I feel like, people talk about that whole natural alpha stuff and natural dominance. Yeah. What did it cost them to get to that level of dominance at age 22? Did they have to actually earn it? Did they fight for it? Did they strive for it? Or was it just always there because of circumstances?
Yeah.
Maybe it's both, because maybe you don't fold if you've been in an environment where you're naturally at the top through your entire life. I imagine it will come at the very least at a little bit of a shock.
Well, it's like being born with money versus earning it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
but sometimes people who are born with money continue making money. The last thing I wanted to mention was the rock bottom. Sometimes the rock bottom is a positive change in the immediate, not necessarily suicidal ideation or a traumatic life event or a medical emergency, if you will. Sometimes it's just like, for me, it was hopping on a plane halfway across the country and starting a new life in Texas. It was great. It's mostly been all the way up, and the reason I mention that is sometimes when you do hit that factory reset button, what you find is your willingness to torch everything, your willingness to drop everything and leave, to take the right of exit, whatever form that might have taken, to take the right of exit, changes the behavior of the people that you were formerly having problems with.
It can.
Yeah.
I do have a question for M. How much of the people that you've been counseling or dealing with, how much do they bring up mental illness being an issue with let me rephrase it. How much have you seen mental illness being a factor in the issue of the man overcoming dominance, whether he has mental health problems, she has mental health problems, or they're surrounded by people with mental health problems?
This one's tough because I don't look at anybody that way. So this is kind of like how this is why I wanted to go off on my own, because I don't want to diagnose anybody. I don't want to treat anybody from that perspective. If I feel like after working with, either an individual or a couple for long enough that I observe on my own that I think there might be some sort of personality disorder or, mood disorder, I would probably then suggest to either, depending on how much they're able to work through it, suggest ways that they can take whatever is working well in their life or wherever that change needs to happen and apply it. Because even if you have bipolar disorder, borderline personality disorder, everything, these mood disorders, you can still apply like a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy techniques and stuff like that to get to a better place. Like some things some people can't. They're too far gone. I won't work with them. You know what I mean?
I'm just thinking, like, for example, if you're and the reason I'm throwing this out there because I'm just thinking, like, for example, if a guy's the biggest question for a man trying to be dominant, particularly in a relationship, is he dealing with someone who's mentally sane? And yes, before somebody says, "Oh, well, women are crazy," it's like, okay, crazy and mentally ill, not the same. We're not even going to go
very
into that.
different.
Like how, because that's different because with mental illness, they don't respond in a normal fashion where they can they can completely make up stuff in real life, and they can speak very authoritatively, and then also you combine the power of them being able to like talk, like you're saying, like domestic violence cases. So like how do you, because that's the issue for a lot of men, they get stuck in these relationships with mentally ill people. What do they do? And then of course it's like there's no salvage in that relationship.
No, I usually just tell them they'll have to, I'll tell them my personal opinion on what I've observed. I'll tell them that I don't see that going in any positive direction. Ultimately, that's entirely up to them, and they can go find, a treatment with a legitimate, like psychiatry, somebody with a PhD, that's fine. But I won't, I don't mess with that because it's so,
because
so convoluted.
I just wonder how much.
Hornets.
Yeah, I just wonder how much mental illness plays into, and hysteria plays into some of this stuff. I have no idea. That's where I'm like curious because I
don't see it that much. I like off the top of my head can only think of about like right now 3 people that I've terminated working with because I thought that there was something legitimately up with them.
They usually the mentally ill, from what I understand, they go to people who tell them what they want to hear. And they're going to go to people who like they just know instinctively, because especially narcissists and people with narcissistic personality disorder, they're going to go to people who are going to tell them that they're the victim and it's not their fault and it's the other person. And they're not going to go to somebody who might say, yeah, you've got a few problems you need to work out or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do find that a lot of times that's women in general, though. Because it requires accountability. I'm just saying, plainly speaking, it requires accountability and a level of personal awareness that you have to encourage them to have, and they are very resistant to that up front.
Oh shit! This is a perfect segue to something related. So, when I'm on Twitter, when I'm listening to friends tell personal stories about their relationships, a common theme I come across when people are shut the fuck up.
I was waiting for it.
Almost forgot my opportunity. Okay.
All right.
A common theme I come across is when people have changed. When I say people, I mean women have changed their frame of reference or their how they view somebody. Often it's coming at the urging of somebody who's not the subject of their opinion, but is viewing them at the same time. One glaring example at the forefront of my mind is girl talks about her experience watching somebody else dance. They think it's weird. One of her friends comes up next to her and sighs and says, "I wish I could dance like that," right? And she detailed or blogged about, I think specifically, how just her frame of reference completely switched because somebody else from an outside point of view regarded something positively. And suddenly it was like a mimetic cure for the ick.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly right. That's what
I wanted to. Yeah, okay. You see where I'm going? Do you want to just launch off from there? I don't even need to finish.
That's exactly what I do. Basically, you take these perceptions that society has put in people's minds that toxic masculinity, these sorts of things that when you start to observe, like if I'm working with a couple and I put them on a sort of assignment or a way to change for the next week, let's say, and she observes these certain behaviors in him. They come back to me and she says, I was really bothered when he did this. And I give her a new way of seeing that, a new way of looking at that, because it is going to be different.
You just lean into it, that's actually pretty odd.
And so
did you ever take that approach?
It's seriously like
a little bit more subtle.
Yeah, just a little, but yeah. But that's exactly what it is. It's teaching people to reframing what society has taught so many people, and it's just destroyed polarity, and it's kind of injecting it back into their relationship, and then telling them it's okay to like that. Mm-hmm. It's okay to enjoy that. It's okay if you want this. You're not a bad person if you want this. You're not less of a, woman or more of a woman or less of a man, blah, blah, blah. All of these things. It's whatever the two of you want to make it, you can do that. That's what it is. And I think, again, usually I haven't worked with anybody that wasn't heterosexual. So, I like what I should say, because polarity is consistent across the board. So,
okay.
Yeah. So that's basically, that's exactly right.
How do you encourage people to do that?
Usually if I take a couple, I will listen to them discuss with me what their main conflicts are. I'll observe certain behaviors out of them, like Rob brought up before, how he was at a point in his marriage where a question would be asked and his ex-wife would be like, she would answer it even if it was addressed to him, that sort of thing. So if I observe these sorts of patterns, right, and I'll take note and watch, and I'll just kind of, then I can add hypotheticals. I can add certain scenarios. I'll ask them how they would respond in that situation. I can see where those default tendencies are, and it's all patterns. And so many of these couples look the exact same. And when they come to me, they think that they're unique and different, and they're not. They're very similar. Everybody's very similar. So then what I do is I start kind of unpacking all of that, and then working with little behaviors to change the way that, that person is living. So if he's allowing her to answer for him most of the time, that would be an exercise that I would work with them on. Right.
I was wondering if you would do that in session. Like, Rob, if you were, how do you think you would feel, or what do you think the experience would be if you sat with your ex-wife in a session with M? Like,
good question with M.
I can tell you how I think it would go, because I've had this.
I don't know how it would go. I do know that when I was done, the ex-wife decided she wanted to try couples therapy. So I went along and went with her. I said, okay, let's do this. And so we went to a therapist, and the guy was about 3.5 days older than dirt, but he'd been a therapist for like 50 years, because that's what he said. He goes, well, I don't know how effective this is going to be. And she said, well, why do you say that? He goes, well, I've been doing this for 50 odd years, and I've seen that look on a man's face before, and the look on your husband's face says he's done. And I kind of looked at him and I just went, bingo. And he goes, well, but for what it's worth, you guys are paying for it, so I'd like to hear from both of you. And he goes, and I'd like to start with you, Rob. And so I started talking, telling him what was going on, what I was thinking, what I was feeling, explaining different things. And she kept trying to interrupt, and he turned around and would say, Karen, I'll get back to you. Right now it's Rob's turn. I want to hear what he has to say. We'll get to you in a minute, but for now, I want to hear him. So I got it all out there, and he had to interrupt her 2-3 times. And basically he ended up telling her, Karen, if you don't be quiet and behave, I'm going to ask you to leave. I want to hear what he says. I want him to be able to finish telling me what he's got to say. Well, so I said my piece, and then she had her turn, and she said her piece. And when we left, I remember walking out going, first time I've actually been heard. Wow.
In decades.
Yeah, literally. Yeah. It's like, wow, I've been heard. And she's bawling, and she's like, you and him ganged up on me. And I'm like, where in the hell did we gang up on you? You know, I'm like, no. He never ganged up on you. From what I saw, he was being very, very neutral, very rational, very reasonable. You just didn't like it because he told you to shut the fuck up. You know?
Yeah.
But we never did go back for another session because he was right from the get-go. I was
Oh no!
Yep.
we never did go back because I was done. It's like, So how it would go with M, I don't know. M, you say you've kind of seen it and heard it before. So what's your take?
Typically,
on the woman.
So the reason why I wanted to go off on my own is so that I could speak candidly however I wanted and not be able to get, my license taken away,
Sure.
So I have very plainly said to women that were similar to Karen, you are not allowing him to speak. You need to sit there for the next however long and wait for him to finish what he has to say and the questions that I have to ask him before I get to you. When I get to you, you will have the time to speak. Until then, this isn't like a free-for-all. And usually she throws me some attitude and, I get kind of like the evil, like, what the fuck? Like kind of, face.
Yeah, Karen had fun with you.
We're gonna send you. We're gonna send you a sound drop. James doing this. Shut the fuck up.
Usually, when I get like that with even my soul clients, like women, and they're by themselves, I will risk losing them. So when I go to that point, they usually will try to avoid me after that.
Oh shit!
They usually run after that. The men don't. The men are wonderful. Like if I have to get to a point where I'm like kind of have to be a little more assertive with them for whatever reason, they're wonderful.
Well, now you're speaking their language.
Yeah.
There's a problem and it needs to be fixed, and there you go. You're using logic and reason.
But the women, as soon as I have to get that, like, because they'll get to that point, or they'll get to the point where they don't want to fix problems. They just want to complain about it. Yeah. And then I'll say, are you here to fix the issue or are you here to complain about it? Because if you're here to complain about it, you have girlfriends for that. You're paying me to fix it. That's what you're paying me for.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I put that in all of my disclosures though, that I'm brutal. Like I'm very.
No, that's needed. That is really neat. I can see where this is. That could be very, very effective. I want to segue into one of my near and dear to my heart subjects: collaring. Yes. So, to me, I've always felt that, and I've made mention of this many times on either social media or my own newsletter or just talking with people, that men need to fuck the jewelry and collar their women. No, I know it's a very broad statement. It's a very bold statement. And a lot of there may be some gnashing of teeth or like some repulsion to that. But I think I can see around. Correct me if I'm wrong. You have your what would be called a day collar.
Yeah, I have a couple of them that he changes out whenever he wants to switch them for whatever reason. And then I have like a posture collar and, various collars for play and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. When you said like, fuck the jewelry, I got what you meant. You mean like convention. You mean
correct. Exactly.
Convention. Yeah.
Yeah.
I understood what you meant by that. Cause, some of the collars are just beautiful. I love them.
Oh yeah, they're the artistry that can go in the simple like leather design, the posture collar, or just a very tight choker with an O-ring on it. Or not even having that at all, or something that's very thin and delicate, but encircles the neck in such a way that those who know. Yeah. And more importantly, the submissive woman knows. She knows her place. She knows what that's there for. She knows why it's there.
That's the best part. And so if we're going to talk about collaring, that would be like for a submissive, the mental perspective that it puts us in
Yep.
is this sort of hyper awareness all the time, because it isn't not only in mind, but in also the way you wear it. It isn't like a necklace. It isn't like anything else it isn't like a wedding ring. It isn't like anything else. The literal weight of it is attached to the weight of that dynamic, the weight of responsibility that you have toward your dominant, toward your master. And that reminder is very comforting. So the collar,
not only that, but it's around one of the most vulnerable parts of your body.
Yeah.
And that's very poignant. At least I think so.
Yeah, I agree. And it truly is something that you feel like weird when you don't, like, if it gets taken off for whatever reason, to like clean it, or, you know, because some of them are made of silver and they tarnish, and anyways, there's all kinds, but it's a very weird, like, out of place feeling, because you, as a submissive, you connect with it on an emotional level, as I'm sure a lot of women do connect with, like, their, you know, wedding rings and their engagement rings and stuff. But the level of connection to your collar is more powerful than any other piece of jewelry you will ever own or have put on you.
Yep. That is absolutely correct. The power that it holds, just like you were talking about, the weight of it being there for the woman. When I can't be there, that is a surrogate for me. That's a reminder. That's a reminder that I am always there to some extent. Yes, for the moment, within legality, I do own you.
Mm-hmm.
Then this is my brand, so to speak. This is my mark.
The beautiful thing about a collar is, like, when you look at something like a wedding ring or an engagement ring, the message is, the sole real message of that is to project to the outside what your status is. And so when you wear that piece of jewelry, your intention of wearing it is to tell other people where you are in the stage of your relationship. And if you look at, like, the size of it or whatever, that's how much he cares about you, blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to a collar, that is more, it speaks to the submissive. It's an inward owning of, like, your position, to the point that you don't give a shit what it is to other people, whether they recognize it or not. It takes on this sort of, it reminds you that you are expected to behave a certain way, to operate within his standards, that the expectations that he has for you at all times. So it's less about what other people see as in these other pieces of jewelry, and it's so much more about who you need to be at all times, whether in his presence or not. So it is something that is so much more powerful in that way, because it's less about other people. It's more about the two of you.
Yes. Very true. And we are coming up on almost the 2-hour mark. Is there anything we want to talk about? I know we didn't touch too much on the bondage aspect of the BDSM, which just means we can come back and do another one. So
yeah, I mean,
there's always room for more discussions. This was actually very fascinating for me. I know we were all over the place with
sometimes though, when it goes like that, it's like the best conversations.
Well, exactly. That's why I like to sometimes sit back and let these flow and see where they go, and then bring in James in and his insightful questioning as well. TJ's Robert was a little silent, but
well, yeah, TJ asked me a question and then stopped talking to let me answer it. So I think TJ needed a therapy session with them more than I did.
Yeah, well, right. All right. So I mean, well, that's why I'm glad I'm asking this question. Yeah. Robert, finish your answer.
Well, overall, with everything I've heard, I am much more in the camp of Rob than TJ. And a lot of the stuff that both M and TJ have talked about, does not fit within my sphere of experience, both whether we're talking about, mommy being disappointed with me or anything. My natural inclination, even as a child, was defiance. And so
Mine too.
yeah, so that was not an issue. And also, my home life growing up was, even though I was unaware that my dad was not my biological father, growing up, actually for the first 40 years of my life, those genetic differences made a difference in the household and how I grew up. I am, by inclination and maybe even in rebellion with my biological parents, somewhat of a paladin by nature. But despite being a person who has a certain personal code that I adhere to, that doesn't mean I won't smack your ass when you get mouthy with me. So, going back to talking about marriage, at least with ex number one, one of the things that would have been beneficial there is, when I came home from work after working 12, 14 hours at a job that did not fulfill me as a human being, but was necessary to live up to my obligations and my duties to take care of my wife and to take care of my two sons. My big mistake was assuming that, as a grown-ass woman, she was a capable adult. And that was a mistake. And I treated her like one, and I shouldn't have. When I came home from work, the first thing I should have done was hug my two sons and then discipline their mother. Instead, I believed her to be a reasonable adult. And when she told me what horrible monsters they'd been all day and how they wouldn't listen to her and they did this and they did that, basically how they were little boys.
You're right. Yeah.
Who behaved as little boys. I trusted their mother, and I went in as the avenging hand of God and brought fear into their lives. And I shouldn't have. I should have went in there and said, I know your mom is bat crap crazy, but women are like that. And you've got to learn how to read them. You've got to learn how to deal with them. I love you both very much. Try not to drive her too crazy. And then I should have gone in, smacked her ass, and said, okay, bring me my dinner. And my marriage may have even lasted had I done that, despite the fact that she and I were very much incompatible. And she basically pretended to be someone she wasn't in order to even have a relationship with me. But as far as hitting rock bottom and stuff, you got to understand there's a big difference in how men can endure pain. And it's not a matter of being masochistic. It's not a matter of us enjoying it. It's a matter of we can deal with it and we can handle it to levels and extremes that I think most women, despite, but we have a baby and we push a basketball out. And it's like, no,
you would never hear
science shows we endure more pain. We have to. We were the warriors. We were the hunters. We do that. And that pain isn't always physical. It's emotional. And we don't process it the way women do. And if we did, and when we are forced to, that is when you have great incidents of tragedy. When you read in the news that, the boy bringing the weapon to school and doing something terrible and evil with it, that's because we're not processing emotions like a man. We're processing them like a woman, and we can't do that. So, as far as the divorce goes and being miserable and waking up in the morning to a job that it's like, do I want to go to work today or do I want to die because death is preferable to doing this job one more day? With the kids, no, I had responsibilities. I had responsibilities to them. So there's no option for me to take the easy way out. Also, it is my natural inclination that those who would have me as an enemy, as long as I'm alive, I'm still a threat to them. And if I'm going to go out, why the hell not take my enemies with me if I have any? And, and the older I get, the more surly I get. There's nothing like some punk trying to slip off to me and telling him I shit chunks of guys bigger and tougher than you and have done so for half a century or better. So, you know, it's Rob is very right, and Rob can be very dramatic, and some of what Rob says may come across as being hyperbolic.
That's probably why it's like I don't agree with it.
But he is dead on right, not just with his own experiences, but just even if you're going to talk the hypotheticals and the generals. And you know, I know sometimes you have to when you're talking about relationships and divorce and stuff like that. But it's like, guys can take a lot of shit and we don't do it because we like it. See, that's the thing. A masochist likes it. We don't like it. We just can do it. We can endure it.
No, when I brought up that, I just want to say, when I brought up the masochist comment, what I'm saying is more to Vincent's point, there's a range. So your level of rock bottom can be before you want to burn everything down. That's kind of what I'm talking about. If you allow yourself to get to the point, and I understand men can take a lot of crap, and I understand they often do due to like their inward sense of responsibility and duty and all of that. But at that rock bottom, if it's all the way in far left field, at some point you are a person that is somehow deriving a reward from that pain along the way. It's serving you in some way.
Of course it's serving you.
If you get out of it, if you learn something from it, if you move beyond it. But if you stay in it or you die, you know, the sweet release of death is the only reward for it. And that's a very debatable and could be an entire topic for a show in and of itself, whether or not it's a reward or not.
Yeah, because I see very different things. I literally see people who like I've had men that enjoy it. They literally enjoy the drama of it.
Well, and they haven't hit rock bottom then in my book, because they are taking some pleasure. They are getting some reward out of it, whatever you want to call it. And I agree with you 100% on that.
That was my point, that if you can go all the way to left field, you enjoyed it.
And I understand that, but I want to go back to where you said that you can change without hitting rock bottom. And this is where I'm going to somewhat agree with you, but mostly disagree with you. And that is, if you don't hit rock bottom, because it ties into what you just said about you get something out of it, whether it's the drama, the suffering, whatever it is, people don't make significant change until they hit rock bottom, has been my experience. Not just in my own life, I've seen it in others. Whether they decided to get sober because they wrapped their car around a tree and almost killed themselves, or in the case of another alcoholic, he gets his 5th DUI and the judge goes, "You're going to prison for 20 years. And that's what woke him up. Is he was going to do serious time. He wasn't going to sit in jail for 30 days. He was going to go to prison. That woke him up and that sobered him up. He made choices that he then went and changed his life, because the alternative was you're going to rot in prison. Anytime, if you haven't hit rock bottom, in my opinion, whether we want to get hyperbolic and start talking, looking down the barrel of a gun or not, you're not going to make significant lasting change if you have not hit rock bottom.
I think what's being argued is whether a man has to hit rock bottom in order to go from being passive to assertive. And
that's exactly right.
And the thing is, some men will have to do that, but there are men who don't, because that's just not.
I haven't met any of those guys yet.
I've met numerous men where all they have to do is just say no.
Exactly.
And that's it. Like, and like, it's kind of like what I was saying. They're surrounded by people who are waiting for them to be assertive, and they're just not by nature dominant people. Then there's other people where it's like they do have to burn everything to the ground. It will cost them everything. And it goes back to the analogy I give, where if you want to buy a house in my hometown, you better be prepared to throw down $1 million. If you're going to go buy a house in Kansas City, you're going to have to throw down like a tenth of that amount.
But going back to the guy that had the family and everyone just waiting for him to say no, and he finally did, it goes back to what I said. So now he feels better, but then he goes out into the real world, runs into someone else who tells him, fuck you. Does his frame, if you will, does his dominance stand up to that?
My guess is yes,
it's probably not going to.
What's causing him to be passive, and this is, again, we're just talking hypothetical, what causing him to be passive is that he's surrounded by people who are not pushing him to go beyond that. It's like a dad who is not pushing him, but the moment he gets his own self-drive.
But if he's never had any resistance and the first time he meets it, how's he going to stand up to that? That's what I mean about, is he really dominant or is it contextual?
But he never had anybody push him. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, it's the psychological part is very fascinating, but I think that the part where
but isn't that the part that matters to me? That's the part that matters the most.
Well, you've got guys who've never had their assertiveness challenged, but they've never had their assertiveness promoted. And that's where, again, it goes back to what I was saying, where a lot of guys that we consider to be dominant or assertive or alpha, it's
and then you find out they're not, because again, it's contextual, it's on paper or whatever, because they've never had any resistance. That's what I'm talking about. We're on the same page here, TJ. And that's where I'm saying, and it's not just a matter of, well, who's a true dominant or not. It's not about that. It's more, and that's why I'm saying you have to burn. You have to be willing to plant your feet and say, I'm not fucking budging. Come push me, move me. And guys that are getting support to say, I was just waiting for you to say no, to me, that guy, like I said, he goes out into the real world, goes outside his friends and family and decides I'm alpha male and gets told no. Does he stand against that, or does he blow back down into that passive?
You've got to be willing to, in my own experience, to stand there and say no. To be within your own frame, to be dominant in your own life. But guess what? Sometimes things in life are bigger than you, and it knocks your dick in the dirt.
Oh, I agree with that too.
And guess what? You get back up and you still say no, and it knocks your dick in the dirt again. Yeah. And it comes to a point where, okay, here we are. I am not going to change. I am not going to say anything other than no. I am not going to bend to your will.
Yeah.
So you've got two choices: either bend to mine or kill me.
Yep.
And that's what Rob's getting at, and that's what Rob's saying, and that's what I've been agreeing with since the start of the show.
That's my point.
I think what we're getting at is the expectation, because with what I'm saying, like with some guys, the expectation is all you have to do is just say something and it's over, whereas the expectation is like, it has to be drilled, like what Robert was just saying, that there's some guys it reminds me of that scene from The Untouchables where Sean Connery is talking to Kevin Costner in the cathedral, and he's saying, you have to be prepared to go all the way. With some guys,
you have to be willing to let it burn.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that every guy will have to go through that.
I think they will.
I think the other thing that has to be conveyed is, like, it's not supposed to be an easy, like, oh, let it burn. Like, it's going to be a painful process for these guys.
Of course it is. And that goes back to what James was saying.
It in a matter-of-fact way. Yeah. I'm saying it I'm saying, like, how it's said also is, like, if I was talking to one of those guys not that I'm a counselor and would ever give counseling advice, but, like, say, you're going to have to go through the most painful experience of your life. You're probably going to have it all burn. It's going to kill you inside, and you're all like feeling like part of you is dying is going to be a natural part of that, and you shouldn't feel like that's bad. But I think the problem is that we set, it's like with so many things in life where we set expectations down, and then when people are like going through it, they think, hey, nobody warned me about this. I feel like this isn't natural, or I've done something wrong. They have to be told they're not doing so. It reminds me of that scene from Good Will Hunting where Robin Williams just keeps repeating, it's not your fault. Like, nobody ever tells those guys it's not their fault that they have to go through this stuff.
I mean, I also want to say that, like, my perspective is relationships
Right.
where now you guys, and we can talk about DS, you know, and there's ranges to that. So where I could never be in a DS dynamic with Rob, right? I have to have one that I feel a certain way in where like that works. And so what I kind of seek to do is blend relationships that can exist in the real world, relationships with kids and a marriage. And if you decide that, or if you don't, but typically I prefer to work with, you know, couples that are either monogamous, you know, or at least, I do prefer that. I'm just going to put it out there, but, so I don't judge anybody else though. That's up to them.
Right.
But because there's that, because
Thank
I'm
you.
seeking to
I
keep them
appreciate it.
together and I'm seeking to keep longevity and I'm seeking to keep, you know, attraction and communication and all of those things, her needs have to be met in a way that is going to be a little more cooperative. And this is where some people like in our, you know, world, in our little niche go like, ugh, like, who cares what she wants and whatever. But
because a lot of times at that point, you're at a point where Rob mentioned this earlier, and Vince has been through this as well. Vince has told everybody on this panel actually a couple of times the different stories where he's been at this point where it's just like, I can't, or I could, but I won't. It's just better to move on to something else at this point because this person has so trashed their reputation in my mind, or their the goodwill was the phrase I was looking for. Trash the goodwill that has been built up in this relationship to the point where I'm not inclined to.
It seems like Emma's dealing with relationships where there's goodwill on both sides. And
yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
I think that what a lot of what I'm hearing from others is that there's so much damage to the relationship. It's just like, this is a formality on our way out the door.
It's irreparable.
And I think that the reality,
and that's typical marriage therapy, you know. That's like
there's a parallel between that and what we're discussing with the rock bottom stuff. Like I said earlier, not all rock bottom is negative, suicidal ideation, mental illness, medical emergency, or stuff like that. Sometimes it's just positive. Sometimes it's just, all right, I'm out. We're gonna have a good time.
But that goes back to, like, if they're going to see M, they're both willing.
And with a relationship, yes, sometimes they're
being honest.
There is that inclination towards, I want to fix this, and both people want to fix it. Yeah. They've enjoyed it enough times that they want to fix something. That's fantastic. Okay. We're going to have a natural bias towards the more negative side because that's what we've personally experienced more often. At that same time, though, I do want to lay the disclaimer. I think that I'm going to misuse a phrase, and I'm going to deserve any autistic hate I get for this. The state plan is the same as the go plan.
Yes, I agree with that.
So let me throw out, because James, you just made me think of something, is that a lot of men realize their dominance when they get put into a rock bottom. And that's the problem, is that they get put into a situation where they have no other option. Whereas
they put themselves there ultimately.
Whereas, like, you know, you're in a relationship with a girl and she's willing to make the reasonable compromises, and you're willing to make reasonable compromises where you don't have to do that. You don't have to tap into that.
You can stop it before it gets there.
It stops before it gets there. And the thing is, like,
because think from the outside perspective, other people looking at you reaching rock bottom. Finally, for the first fucking time, he's expressing a little bit of agency in his own life.
I think
just done it beforehand, he wouldn't be there right now. That's what people looking outside are looking at us like.
I think,
and they're kind of right.
That's true. Yeah,
I think the disagreement where there would be disagreement is where it gets to the point where they're both willing to work it out, whereas as opposed to going to the mattresses. Because the guy who goes to and gets it worked out, and the relationship gets worked out, and they go on to be happy, he's not going to ever hit that rock bottom and he may never ever truly realize that true dominance that people talk about, but the relationship's saved.
And everything's good. That's exactly. That's
my I think we've just got, I think that we're getting at that issue. And I think that the thing is, like, it's an interesting concept of like a man and a woman truly knowing themselves. At the same time, should they always have to go through the extreme in order to know themselves? Because like, how many extreme, like, would you have to be willing to like chuck your own kid off a cliff in order to know yourself? No, but so, or like, deal with very extreme circumstances in order to truly know yourself.
Like, do I know the true extent of my submission unless I'm literally removed of all of my ability to make any decision for myself whatsoever?
Right.
I have no way to provide for myself. I have no option, no support system. I'm at the point of slave.
Yeah.
Well, who cares if you haven't been through that as of yet?
That's my point, though. That's what I was trying to say is you don't have to hit rock bottom to make change, to better your life.
I can see the faces on the panel here. Most of us, we don't care all that much,
Well, but
it's a genuine desire or not.
No, I do have some questions here to kind of bring it back to tying it back.
Because I do care.
All right, hang on. All right, shh, hang on. I am fucking tired. It is 11:19 on
this
the
was
East
a
Coast.
good discussion, though.
This is a very good discussion. I wish I had more time, and I wasn't as tired as I was. I dealing with drinking too much alcohol last night, getting 2 hours of sleep, having maybe a 40-minute nap.
Well, now we know who's drinking all the rum.
No, it wasn't the rum, but it was 6 vodka gimlets, 6 too many.
Ooh.
Yes. So as much fun as I had last night, and as much fun as I'm having now, and I wanted to continue, I'm going to have to call a halt to it, and then we will pick it up in another, definitely another session, as it will.
Have you picked the Fortress guest for this?
I have,
month?
Yes, but we are going to have M back on the Fortress talk. So with this, we could talk even more candidly than we already are.
I think it's such a good group. It's a good group because my angle is a little different, obviously, not only because I'm a woman.
No, it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah.
I enjoy these.
I write a note where M brought up she couldn't be in a DS relationship with me.
Yeah, I was kind of fixated on that. I'm
I know, right?
Okay. So
I couldn't.
Yeah.
I know me. Then that's the thing. The one last question I do want to ask. M, in your personal relationship, without going into details, are you 24/7 TPE?
I've the couples that I've met that
you, not your couple.
I know, but because I have a reference of comparison to more extreme people, I would say no.
Okay, that's fair. Because from my end, and this is where I want to, make some clarifications or whatever. When I get into things with my women, okay, I do not do TPE. I don't do 24-hour, that kind of stuff. She has her autonomy. She has her life. Most of my relationships with women are far more vanilla and just regular, if you want to call it that. That the bondage dominance stuff tends to be more in the bedroom. And even then, it's not always the same. It's just, that's just a faucet for me. Vince gets way more into it than I do. Okay. Mine's more psychological.
More into it than everybody does.
Well, mine. You have to understand something too. I can't show you my psychological dominance, which I am very heavy in as well.
Right.
I love all of it. I'm a sadist at heart.
Yep, same.
I enjoy making women cry. I enjoy making women cry consensually.
Yes, I'll agree with that.
And they have the most beautiful sleep afterwards. And that's not all. That's the only reason why they're sleeping well. But having said that, I can't show the psychological part of it. No one really can.
Right.
The physical aspect of it is easy because it's hey, look at this.
Right.
You can see that.
Right.
So all that stuff flows together in a wonderful amalgam, which I love. However, we are going to write down and take your notes. Everyone take their notes. Mark the timestamp. I want to do another one of these very soon. Probably in March, if that's
that would be awesome. Yeah. I'd
that
love
square, yeah, so it squares with everyone's schedules. And I do want to have you on a Fortress meeting as well,
to. Okay.
the private. So that's cool. All right. So where can everyone find you if they want to get in touch with you?
I'm not big on the socials, so it's really just Twitter and traditionaltaboo.com. At Twitter, I'm at mtradtaboo.
Excellent. Excellent. And gentlemen, real fast, where can we find you, Robert?
Robert Kuzlin on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and with the Masculine Geek.
Exactly. Rob?
RobSays.net.
Fan-fucking-tastic. Jimmy?
All right, you can find me on YouTube at Gelatinous Rube if you're into some
That's really
tabletop
funny.
role-playing game nonsense.
Good stuff.
Or you can find me at James Streissand on Kickstarter. We have a new RPG zine up. So if you're into collecting or you're into playing smaller games or trying them out for a change, especially if you're...
I want to learn D&D.
You can.
You're
You've
still
come
not
to the-
playing with my toys, Em.
I
I don't care how cute you are or how
Yeah.
much respect you have. You're
Yeah.
not playing with my toys.
You can learn
No.
D&D, but we don't do co-ed games on our.
I don't blame you.
If you can find 2 other women that want to play,
That'd be hard.
we'll run a
Would you like to
game with
play a
all
game?
women, but we don't
Just source from your clients. Come on, you don't have to worry about any ethical considerations.
Exactly.
You're good. Listen, you can bend the rules here.
We'll run a game for the ladies, but we don't do co-eds. And last but not least, cool dude.
You can find me at tjmartinell.com.
There you go.
I like how Vince got all the DOMs on the top and all the subs on the bottom. I'm
All right, that's
They're shading me because I'm clean shaven.
I love it.
Proud of it. Proud of it.
That
Okay.
you I've never been more proud to know you, Robert, than I am now right now. Oh. And on that
I'm very
note,
comfortable here. I love being a bottom.
there you go. It's
She's my bottom. My bottom. So
that's right.
3 bottoms, except one, the one in the middle. The other 2 are trying to top from the bottom.
Nice. Love it. Fucking fantastic. And on that note, let's do it.
That's a catchy